just like to welcome you along to this edition of Bunkai Strategies. Okay, so this time the principle of the week and the technique of the week are so tightly intertwined that I can't actually do them separately. They've got to be shown together. So let's get straight into it. The move we're going to do, if you'll excuse me turning my back to you, is this one. And there's a reason I'm not doing that towards the camera. And what we see is in the kata Chinte, this move is done. It's off the other arm, but it comes off that way. People like to think about things like Oizuki chew down, and this is used to block that and all this kind of thing. And you've got to say, well, why? Why would you do that? You know, even if you were going to use Uchiuki as a block, this hand wasn't necessary. So let's make sure it's in a good context. This deep into the kata, there's going to be a bit of in-close work. And so at some stage during the scuffle, you might find that you get the opportunity to do something like this. So as we've been in here and we're scrapping about and there's been striking and all sorts of things like this, what we do is to slide one hand down and get hold on the jaw and pull that out. And what you'll see that's lacking is this hand. Because if this one comes over the top and restricts that shoulder from turning back, and Pete's just tapped me, so I've stopped doing the move, then we get something very, very nasty happen. So why fingers in this kind of formation? Actually, this is just a measuring device. This just tells us that if I touch anywhere along here, if I go about that far apart, I'm going to get something good. So you could grab with your whole hand, but what we're using here is the kata specifically showing us that that goes in there. And if we withdraw this hand and make the hikite at the same time, keeping hold, then the effect gets much, much nastier naturally. Now, would you ever do that? I hope not. I hope you'd never have cause to. It's certainly not a technique for winning a competition or anything like that. Instead, it's only ever for, I guess, the worst situation you can possibly imagine. So, our principle is the one from Chinte, and our technique is the one from Chinte, and our principle is that these kind of measurements tell us about what we can do on the human body. This kind of span, doesn't matter whether you're 11 years old or 50 years old, 70 years old, this kind of span is always going to land on something useful. So what do we mean by something useful? Well, I've just shown you up here on the jaw, and we'd be taking what some people might like to call the stomach 6 point, stomach 5 point, stomach 4 point, something like that. What if I don't get that? Well, then we come up here onto the cheek, and we'll also catch useful positions. Depending on where we dig in, it's always going to be good. Okay, so whatever we do with that. Now, other places on the body. Well, if the hand goes round to the neck, then just digging in there, we're going to catch something useful. What about the follow-on to that, the move where we shoot through? People like to say they go for the eyes, and then everyone goes, yeah, well, I know the block for that, and that's all very funny. But people don't realise that if you just take those and go there, then you get a very similar kind of effect without actually having to puncture anything spherical. Instead, we just look at the neural effect of dropping that on there. So that's a fingertip touch. You can imagine if we were to take the whole of the hand and wrap on that place, what kind of effect you get there. The other thing about these moves is when we do the kata for performance, we tend to speed through. It looks nice and dynamic and fits the style of karate and everything else. But if we were in the middle of stuff that's going on down here like this, and we've tried all the hitting and everything else, sometimes you don't get to shoot through as fast as you can. Instead, you just get to press. And when you press, that gets you enough anyway, where even if the move is somewhat slower than the performance would be for the sake of getting a grade or winning a competition. So our principle is all about spanning, measuring. And I've just shown you on the neck and the head and down here onto the collarbone. And it's got to be that you don't necessarily worry about just there. You can come off over here. That's through the thickness of the gi. What about if I'm actually up here on an arm, or just digging in this way is going to catch me that feeling? What about if we're a lot lower down and coming in under here or onto here? We're going to still get vulnerable places, and we're going to get a better effect than if I just take hold like this. If I hook, I'm going to catch something useful. So the principle that we come back to is the span of the fingers dictates how wide apart we want our targets to be. And then the motion, the movement, the pulling out of the move tells us that we've got hold of something and we're moving it. Our principle is that we're doing this, and it's not what's here at the end of the movement, it's what comes with us to get to the end of the movement that's the important thing.